I slept with a resident doctor after a coworker convinced me my husband was cheating, but he saw a message from my lover and threw me out that same day. Now I don't trust anyone anymore. I don't know if I'm looking for advice, understanding, or simply a way to release this guilt that is consuming me. My name is Emily, I'm 22 years old, and until recently I lived with my boyfriend Donato, 26. I say I lived because I'm no longer in that apartment, and although it was my home for over a year, now I can barely look at it without feeling a knot in my stomach. Donato and I had been together for a year and a half. We met through a mutual friend during a birthday dinner. From the first time I saw him, I was struck by the way he spoke. He was calm, confident, with a maturity that I found attractive. He wasn't the type of guy who tries to get attention or who brags about what he has. He was rather reserved, but when he spoke, he did so with such clarity that everyone listened. At that time, I was starting my second year of medical school, and he already had his own business, a small used car agency that over time became quite profitable. Our relationship was intense from the beginning. He treated me with a kindness I had rarely seen. He always made me feel cared for, safe. When we started living together, it was his idea. He told me that way I could concentrate better on my studies, that I shouldn't worry about anything else. He paid the rent, the utilities, the food, even my university tuition. At first, I felt uncomfortable because I didn't like to depend so much on someone, but he insisted that he did it gladly, that he saw a future for us, and that my career was important. For a long time, I felt lucky. Donato was everything I had dreamed of: hardworking, intelligent, responsible, someone who didn't party, who didn't lie, and who always had time to listen to me. But I guess that like in all relationships, small cracks started to appear: the routine, the absences, the silences. He used to spend long hours away from home. At first, it was normal, his job required it, but over time I started to notice certain behaviors that worried me. Sometimes he would go out on the balcony to answer calls, or he would move away a little when he was on the phone. It wasn't constant, but enough to arouse my mistrust. I tried not to think badly, but there was something in his tone of voice, in that way he would look down when I asked him who he was talking to, that made me feel insecure. One night, a few weeks ago, he told me he had to travel for work. It would only be 3 days, he explained, and he promised he would be back before the weekend. I believed him because his business sometimes required visiting other cities to close deals or check cars he planned to buy. However, before he left, I noticed he was texting a lot with one of his employees. I saw him smiling at the screen, writing and deleting as if he were choosing each word carefully. When I approached to ask him something, he turned the phone face down. I didn't say anything, but I felt it. Something inside me told me that something wasn't right. Those 3 days were torture. I couldn't concentrate on anything. Every time I saw that he didn't answer my messages immediately, my mind filled with images. I imagined he was with another woman, that he was laughing with her, that he was taking her to dinner, or that they were sleeping together. I told myself I was exaggerating, but I also remembered the times I had heard similar stories from my friends, and they all started the same way, with small signs, with subtle behaviors that later turned out to be warnings that one decides to ignore. When Donato came back, I noticed he was different. He was quieter than usual, but he seemed happy. He hugged me as soon as he saw me, brought me a box of chocolates and a heart-shaped keychain. He told me he had been thinking about me the whole trip. I smiled, but inside me the suspicion only grew. I noticed his phone vibrating, and he quickly put it in his pocket. That simple gesture broke me. I waited a couple of hours until he got in the shower, and I took his phone. I know it's not right, and I know it was an invasion of his privacy, but I needed to know. I unlocked it with his fingerprint because he had always trusted me enough to register it, and I started to check the messages. I didn't find anything out of place. Just conversations with employees, clients, and his mother. But then I saw that he had a pinned chat with no name, just a heart emoji. I went in, and to my surprise it was empty. There were no messages, not a single one. That seemed even more suspicious to me. When he got out of the shower, I confronted him. I showed him the chat and asked him who it was. He told me it was a surprise, that he couldn't tell me yet, but that I would know soon. I insisted. I got angry. I yelled at him not to treat me like a fool, that I didn't want to hear excuses. He tried to calm me down, but I was already beside myself. It hurt me to think that maybe everything we had built was about to collapse. I said things I shouldn't have. I insulted him. I berated him for all the financial support, as if that were a bad thing. He was silent most of the time. He looked at me with a mixture of sadness and patience, and in the end he just said, "Emily, if you don't trust me either, I don't know what else I can do, but I swear I haven't cheated on you. Tomorrow you'll see what that surprise really was." I replied that I was no longer interested in his lies, and I left the apartment. He followed me to the door and asked me not to go, to at least wait until the next morning. But I didn't want to listen to him. I told him I had a shift at the hospital and I needed to leave. He tried to explain something to me, but I closed the door before he could finish. During the whole way to the hospital, my head was full of thoughts. I couldn't concentrate on driving or on what I had to do. The only thing I kept repeating in my mind was, he lied to me, he hid something from me. It was probably another woman. When I arrived, I met my shift partner, Luna. She was always very direct, sometimes too much. When I told her what had happened, she listened to me in silence for a few minutes, and then she said something that at that moment seemed logical, but now I realize it only fueled my anger. "Emily, all men are the same," she told me. "Don't wear yourself out trying to justify him. If he was hiding it, it's for a reason. Nobody does that if they have nothing to hide." I tried to defend him, to tell her that Donato wasn't like that he had always been honest, but as I was saying it, I realized I wasn't sure anymore. Luna kept talking to me, telling me about her experiences, about her friends who had gone through the same thing. I just listened, getting more and more upset. My shift was long, 12 hours, and between breaks and attending to patients, I kept mulling over the same issue. At one point in the early morning, when fatigue and anger were mixed, Luna said something to me that hit me. "You should stop crying for someone who is probably with someone else." Do you know what I would do? I would have a little fun to show him I don't need him. I laughed at first, I took it as a joke, but the idea kept swirling in my head. Not because I wanted revenge, but because at that moment I felt I had nothing to lose. It hurt me to think I had been so foolish, that I had given myself completely to someone who in my mind was betraying me. That night, during a break, a new resident at the hospital came up to talk to me. His name was Matthias. He was kind, charismatic, and he noticed I wasn't well. He offered me a coffee, made me laugh a little, and for a few minutes I managed to forget about Donato. But then, when I went back to the break room, my phone vibrated. It was a message from him. "I love you, and I promise you'll understand everything tomorrow. Please don't be angry anymore." I didn't answer. I looked at it for several seconds, but pride won. I felt offended that he continued with his surprise and didn't tell me the truth. Luna was with me at that moment and saw the message. "See?" she said with a mocking smile. "He's probably trying to calm you down while he's with the other one. Don't fall for it." Her words hurt me more than I imagined. I felt a pang in my chest, a mixture of anger, sadness, and wounded pride. I didn't answer, I just put my phone away trying to keep my composure, but inside I was burning. I couldn't stop thinking about Donato, about what he might be doing, about how he was surely laughing at me while he was lying to me. That night the hospital was quiet. There weren't many patients, which was rare for a night shift. At 3 a.m, the atmosphere was almost silent, with only the hum of the machines and the distant sound of footsteps in the hallway. I went to the break room to have a coffee and clear my head a little. I felt emotionally exhausted, but I couldn't sleep. While I was sitting there half-heartedly reviewing some notes, Matthias approached. He was the new resident, about 24 years old, with a kind smile and a curious look. We had spoken a couple of times, but nothing beyond professional. That night, however, he noticed something different in me. "Are you okay?" he asked me while pouring himself a coffee. "Yes, just tired," I replied without looking at him much. "You don't look like it," he insisted in a soft tone. "Your eyes are red." I didn't know what to say. I was silent for a few seconds, and without meaning to, my thoughts returned to Donato. The images in my head, the suspicious calls, the messages, everything. I couldn't take it anymore. Without thinking, I blurted out a phrase that came from my soul. Why do all men lie and are unfaithful? Matthias looked at me surprised, not fully understanding. What are you talking about? He asked with a nervous smile. And that's when something inside me broke. I told him everything. I told him about Donato, the trip, the chat with the heart emoji, how he was behaving strangely, how I felt something was wrong. As I spoke, I started to cry. It wasn't a loud cry, but a silent one, the kind that comes out when you can no longer contain the weight of emotions. Matthias put down his cup and came closer. He handed me a tissue and then, almost without a word, he hugged me. It was a simple gesture, but at that moment it felt so comforting that I didn't reject it. He said in a low voice, if I were with a woman as beautiful and intelligent as you, I would never cheat on you. I don't know why, but his words pierced me. It wasn't just the compliment, but the way he said them, with a calm and confident voice, as if he really believed it. I looked at him and felt something strange, a mixture of pain, anger, confusion, and an absurd need to feel valued. And then, without thinking too much, I asked him, have you ever had an affair in a hospital? You know, something to de-stress a little. Matthias was silent for a few seconds, surprised by my question. I looked him straight in the eyes and, without knowing why, I put my hand on his leg, caressing it gently. I didn't think, I just did it. It was as if all the anger and frustration were looking for an immediate outlet, as if I wanted to prove to myself that I could also hurt. He smiled with a certain disbelief and replied, well, I've never done it, but I think that's about to change. He looked at me intently and moved a little closer. He kissed me, and although I hesitated at first, I ended up responding. I felt my heart racing, my mind screaming at me to stop, but my body wouldn't obey. It was as if the anger was driving me. At that moment, I didn't think about the consequences, or Donato, or anything. I just wanted to stop feeling weak, betrayed, humiliated. Matthias took my hand and led me to the ICU. At that hour it was empty, with no patients or staff. It was a secluded, silent place, with the dim lights on. And there, between the distant sound of the monitors and the smell of disinfectant, we did it. While it was happening, a part of me wanted to cry. Not only for what I was doing, but because I knew that none of it would alleviate the pain I was carrying inside. When it was all over, I stared at the ceiling for a few seconds, feeling an unbearable mixture of guilt and shame. Matthias tried to speak, but I just got up, straightened my uniform, and left without a word. Never in my life had I felt so empty. I had not only betrayed Donato, but also my principles, my professional ethics, and everything I thought I was. I felt dirty, weak, confused. But at the same time, a dark part inside me thought that now we were even, that if he had cheated on me, I also had the right to do so. It was an absurd justification, I know, but that night I clung to it so as not to break down completely. My shift ended at 8 in the morning. I went straight home. Donato hadn't woken up yet when I arrived, so I got in the shower trying to wash away what I had done, although I knew you can't clean something like that. I lay down and fell asleep almost immediately, exhausted by the night, by the guilt, by everything. I woke up at 3 in the afternoon with the sound of the door. Donato was back. He came into the room and, to my surprise, he approached with a smile. He hugged me tightly and kissed me on the forehead. Come on, he said with an excitement I hadn't heard in his voice in days. The truth is I had a surprise for you. We're going to Paris for vacation. He stepped back a little and showed me the tickets. I froze. The purchase dates were from 3 days ago, right when he had made that work trip. At that moment, everything fell into place. The chat with the heart emoji wasn't from another woman, it was from the agency or someone who was helping him prepare the surprise. I felt a void in my stomach. Everything I had imagined, all the anger, all the conclusions I had reached, everything was false. I had accused him unjustly. I had betrayed him for no reason. Why so much secrecy? I asked him with a trembling voice. He smiled, still with that illusion in his eyes, and replied, because there's a bigger surprise on the trip. But I was going to tell you that there. I looked at him, trying not to break down. I wanted to tell him the truth, to confess what I had done, but I couldn't. The guilt paralyzed me. I just nodded and faked a smile. And then, as if fate wanted to punish me right then and there, my phone vibrated on the table. I picked it up without thinking, and the screen showed a notification. It was a message from Matthias. Let's repeat the on-call thing today too, or what? Donato saw it. His expression changed immediately. What is that? He asked with a serious voice. Nothing. It's not what you think, I tried to say. What does it mean? He insisted. I tried to lock the screen, but he took the phone from me. He unlocked it and opened the conversation. It wasn't just the message, there was also a photo. I don't need to describe it in detail, but it was enough to leave him speechless. It was Matthias in a completely inappropriate picture. Donato stood still for a few seconds looking at it, and then he looked at me. His face went from astonishment to horror, and finally to absolute anger. He stood up abruptly and shouted, "Get out. You just ruined everything. Get out of my house." I tried to explain myself, crying, trembling, begging him to listen to me. "Donato, please. It was a mistake. I thought you were cheating on me," but he didn't want to hear anything. He looked at me with tears in his eyes, with a mixture of pain and disappointment that I will never forget. "Do you know who the contact with the heart was?" he said as he took something out of his pocket. He opened a small velvet box. Inside was an engagement ring, and it was the jeweler who made this. "In Paris, I was going to propose to you, but you ruined it." I couldn't say anything. I felt the ground crumbling under my feet. I tried to get closer, but he backed away. He took my things, my clothes, my books, and started to take them out to the hallway. I was crying, trembling, asking him not to do it, but he didn't look at me anymore. He just repeated with a broken voice, "Go. I don't want to see you ever again." And that was it. I left the apartment with what little I could carry. I cried for hours, not knowing where to go, not being able to understand how something so perfect had been destroyed in a single night. All because of my pride, my insecurities, for not trusting the person who had loved me the most. Now I'm writing this here looking for help, looking for advice, because I don't know how to live with what I did. I lost everything, not just Donato, but also the image I had of myself. I don't know if I deserve a second chance, but I would give anything to go back and stop myself before I did what I did. I just want to know if there is any way, however small, to repair something that seems irreparably broken. Update. It's been almost 3 weeks since everything happened. I don't really know how to start this, but I needed to write again. Maybe because I have no one to talk to, or because the nights are too long for me. Since I left Donato's apartment, my life feels like it has come to a screeching halt. I'm now living with a friend from university. Her name is Karina. I barely knew her beyond academics, but when she found out what had happened, she offered me to stay at her apartment temporarily. I accepted because I had no other option. I have no family here. My parents live in another city, and moving in with them is not an option. For now, I'm in this place for university, and if I leave, I would lose the semester and all the effort I've invested. Every morning I wake up with that feeling of emptiness. Sometimes it takes me a few seconds to remember that I no longer live with Donato, that I don't have his voice to wake me up or his good morning message. Then everything comes back at once, like a wave that drags me down and leaves me breathless. I've tried to contact him. I called him many times the first few days, but he didn't answer. Then I realized he had blocked me from calls, messages, social media, everything. It's as if he had completely disappeared from my life. I can't blame him. I know he has no obligation to listen to me, but it hurts. It hurts to know that I can't explain to him what I really felt, even though I know that nothing would justify what I did. What hurts me the most is having destroyed something that was good. He wasn't perfect, of course not, but he was a good person. He took care of me, he supported me, he pushed me to continue my studies when I wanted to give up, and I betrayed him in the worst possible way. Now I don't know what I'm going to do. Donato paid my tuition, the bills, everything. I don't have a stable job, and what little I saved is running out. I'm looking for a part-time job, but it's not easy, especially with the hospital internship hours. Sometimes I wonder if I can continue in medicine or if I'll have to give it all up. The worst part is not just the financial situation, it's the way people have treated me since I told my story here. I understand I did something terrible, I know, but many of the comments have been cruel. They call me all sorts of things, they insult me, they wish horrible things on me. And although I try to ignore it, it hurts. It hurts because I'm not a monster. I'm a person who made a mistake. An unforgivable one, yes, but a mistake. I didn't plan it. It wasn't a cold or calculated betrayal. It was a stupid impulse, a moment of anger, of vulnerability, of feeling less, and I paid for it with everything. Sometimes I read the comments just to feel that someone is listening to me. Amidst so much hate, there are some girls who have been understanding. They don't justify me, but they understand me. They tell me they have felt the same way, that they have also reacted badly out of fear or insecurity, and that regret is a heavy burden to carry. I appreciate those words very much because they are the only thing that makes me feel a little less alone. I don't expect anyone to forgive me. I don't even know if I could do it if I were in Donato's place. But every day I wake up with the desire to repair something, even a little, to become someone who doesn't make the same mistakes again. Sometimes I think about writing him a letter, even if he never reads it, or going to look for him, but I'm afraid he will reject me, that he will look at me with the same pain he looked at me with that day. That look still haunts me. I don't know what will happen to me. I don't know if I can continue with my studies, or if I'll have to go back to my parents and start from scratch. I just know that I can't go on like this forever. I have to accept what I did, but I also have to keep living. I'm not asking for compassion, just a little understanding. I'm not someone who wanted to hurt, just someone who did it without thinking and is now paying the consequences. Thanks to those who, despite everything, have had words of empathy. You don't know how much that means in the midst of so much guilt and loneliness. Update. I went to the place where Donato worked. I didn't know exactly what I hoped to achieve, but I felt I needed to see him, to talk to him, to explain something. Maybe to beg him to listen to me, to understand that it was a mistake, that I didn't plan it, that I simply let myself be carried away by the pain and anger. When I arrived, the guard recognized me immediately. "I'm sorry, miss," he told me with a firm but not harsh voice. "The boss has strictly forbidden us to let you in. I don't know what you did to him, but he doesn't want you to even get close to him." I stood in silence, looking at the ground. I felt all the air leaving my chest. I didn't have the courage to insist. I just nodded my head and walked away. I walked for several blocks aimlessly, not knowing what to do, with that horrible feeling of having lost something that will not come back. That night, when I arrived at my friend's apartment, I broke down. I have no other word to describe it. I threw myself on the bed and cried until I ran out of tears. The university is pressuring me with the payment. They gave me a deadline, but I no longer have money and Donato was the one who helped me with most of the expenses. I called my parents to ask them for help, but they live far away and they can't cover such a large amount. They told me they would try to get something, but I know it's very difficult for them. I have tried to communicate with Donato in every possible way. I have called him, I have sent him emails, messages from unknown numbers, nothing. He blocked me from everything. It's as if I had ceased to exist for him. And I understand it in part. What I did was terrible, I have no way to justify it. But it hurts me to see how everyone judges me, how the comments on Reddit were filled with hatred, calling me horrible things, wishing me the worst. Nobody understands that I didn't do it for pleasure, but for pain, that it was a moment of anger, of emptiness, of feeling betrayed and wanting revenge without thinking. I have read the few comments from girls who tell me to breathe, to try to pull myself together, that mistakes don't define me forever, and I really appreciate them. They make me feel a little less alone, but the truth is that I don't know what to do now. I have no money, I have no home, I have no partner, and the guilt doesn't let me sleep. Sometimes I think about going to the hospital and asking Matthias to help me, but then I feel disgusted just thinking about it. I don't want to see him again. It was part of the mistake, and I'm not going to repeat it. I just want to get out of this, to be able to talk to Donato, to look him in the eyes and ask for his forgiveness for real. Not for us to get back together, but for him to listen to me, for him to know that I loved him. Even though I showed it in the worst possible way. Update. It's been 2 months since everything fell apart, and although time has continued to move forward, I feel like I'm still stuck in the same place. I haven't spoken to Donato again. I don't know anything about him beyond what other people have told me. I dropped out of medical school. Not because I was expelled or because I couldn't continue. In fact, I managed to maintain my grades and I didn't lose my academic progress, but the money simply wasn't enough. The university was clear. Without the tuition payment, I couldn't continue attending classes. They told me that if next year I managed to cover the registration, I can resume my studies from where I left off. But that depends entirely on me. The first few days after dropping out of college were the hardest. I would spend the mornings looking at my notes, the open books on the table, with the feeling that everything I had built had collapsed because of a single impulsive decision. It wasn't just losing a relationship, it was losing my future, my plans, my direction. I looked for a job, anything. It wasn't easy. I ended up in a coffee shop waiting tables on the night shift. Sometimes I think about the irony. Before, I spent my nights studying clinical cases, and now I spend my nights serving coffee to students who are doing the same thing I used to do. I smile bitterly when I hear one of them talk about anatomy or pharmacology. I feel like joining the conversation, but I stay quiet. I don't want to explain why I dropped out of college. I tried to find Donato, at least to see him one last time, but it's as if he had disappeared. He changed his number. He doesn't live in the same apartment, and he no longer posts anything on social media. I thought that over time I would find a way to get closer, but every attempt was useless. A few days ago, a mutual friend showed me something that left me in shock, some photos of Donato in Paris. It was the exact dates we were supposed to travel together. But this time he wasn't with another woman, but with his mother. At first, I felt a pang in my chest, as if I couldn't breathe. Seeing those images was a reality check. There he was smiling in front of the Eiffel Tower, with that expression he always had when something made him happy. And next to him his mother hugging him. In one of the photos she was wearing a ring, not an engagement ring, but a souvenir ring from the same jewelry store where he had had mine made. I recognized it by the design. I couldn't help but feel relieved. It hurt me to see him there, but at the same time it reassured me to know that he wasn't with someone else, that he hadn't replaced me so quickly, that at least he didn't share that trip with anyone other than his mother. I cried a lot that night, but not out of jealousy. I cried for what I destroyed, because I realized that Donato, even after everything, had kept his promise. He really wanted to give me a surprise. There were no lies, no other woman. It was all in my head, fueled by my insecurities and a bad influence at the worst possible moment. And I ruined everything. Since then, I've been trying to rebuild myself little by little. I don't want to get stuck in guilt, although it still weighs on me. I started saving what little I earn. Maybe if I keep this up, in a few months I can save enough to pay the re-enrollment and go back next year. I know it won't be easy, but at least it's a goal. I've stopped checking Reddit so often, but every now and then I go in and read the comments. Some are still cruel, and although they hurt, I try not to take them so personally. I understand that for many it's easy to judge when they only read part of the story, but I've also received private messages from people who have told me similar things, impulsive mistakes, decisions that changed the course of their lives. They have made me feel less alone. Sometimes I think about writing a last letter to Donato, not to ask him to come back, but to close the cycle. To tell him that I'm sorry I distrusted him, that I hurt him, that I stained something that was sincere. But I stop myself because I know that maybe he is already at peace and I don't want to reopen old wounds. I've changed a lot in these 2 months. I no longer get angry at the world. I stopped blaming Matthias, Luna, or even Donato. It was me who decided to cross that line. It was me who confused pride with justice. Today, I can only look forward. I work, I study when I can on my own, and I try to heal. Sometimes I think about how ironic it is that to understand fidelity, I had to live the consequence of losing it. If I've learned anything, it's that regret doesn't erase the damage, but it can be the first step to not repeating it. Donato, if you ever read this, I want you to know that I'm not looking for you to come back. I just want to thank you for what you were in my life, for having believed in me when I didn't even believe in myself. I hope you're well. I hope you've found peace. I will try to do so too. I don't know if I'll ever go back to medicine, but I do know that I want to feel worthy of what I dreamed of doing again. And that starts now with my own steps, with my own mistakes, and with the decision not to give up. Because even though I lost everything, I still have something.